Hi, boys and girls, it's me, Miss Gould, and I'm here to read Chapter 9 from The Water Horse to you. I just have to find it. Okay, I found it. Chapter 9, Posty. Crusoe swallowed the swan with ease and satisfaction. He was not fussy, as Grumble had guessed much earlier, and it made a good square meal and a welcome addition to his diet of fish and eels. He had lived in the Lochen long enough now to have caused the fish supplies to shrink, and once he had realized that there was prey on top of the water as well as below it, a great many waterfowl, feeding or resting on the surface, went to satisfy his appetite. The water horse took coot, moorhens, seagulls even, but especially duck, those birds that fed by dabbling, like mallard, teal, and widgeon, were sticking their necks out. As for the diving ducks, such as puckered and tufted duck, they were even easier meat for Crusoe, and he took several eider down to the bottom. Once even a great northern diver went west, all of which led him one day to bite off more than he could chew. Another year had gone by. Father had been home on leave twice, marveling each time at Crusoe's growth. He was now nearly 2.5 years old, and Father and Grumble were beginning to get worried. How much longer can he stay here? They asked each other. How long will the fish last? How long before he's so big that concealment in such a small lock is impossible? One day in the late summer of 1932, something happened that made them worry even more. It was the afternoon of a calm, warm day, and Crusoe was taking his usual nap. It was his custom to have a good rest between the mornings and the evenings hunting, and as always, he slept under water, rising for air at intervals. These, since he was so much bigger, could be as long as 15 minutes. Now, as he floated very slowly up, nose tilted ready to draw an automatic breath, his snout bumped gently on something hard, and he awoke. Sinking back down a little, he looked upward at the dark object that lay on the surface above his head. It was large, almost as large as himself, and was pointed at one end and squared off at the other. It was not moving. I think I know what it is. How could that be? Thought the water horse. At that moment there was a little splash in some distance from the thing, and Crusoe swam over to investigate. But the length of line, with its hook and its silvery spinner, meant nothing to him, and he swam back beneath the dark object. He would have liked to stick his head out of the water and have a good look at it. But this, he knew, the giants would not like. They would not complain, surely, if he just took a little bite out of it. Crusoe swam up, opened his jaws wide, and bit through the bottom of the boat. We see an illustration right here of him swimming towards the boat. Mother and the children had gone down to the beach, and Grumble was alone in the small white house when he heard a knock at the door. He opened it, and there stood Posty, white-faced and dripping wet. "Why, Mr. McNab!" said Grumble. Posty, he knew, kept an old half-rotten dinghy tied up by the lock-in, and in his off-duty hours would sometimes try for the huge old pike that local folk believed to be lurking in its depths. "Did you tumble in now?" he said. "Tumble in?" said Posty. "Man, there's something awful big in that lock-in. I felt a wee bump under the boat just before I cast, and then next minute there was a crunching noise, and something tore the bottom out of her. A hole the size of a frying pan there was, and the water pouring in. She sank before I could get her to shore, you know. Boat, rod, and tackle. I've lost it all. I was near drowned." "You were near eaten, too," thought Grumble. He pulled thoughtfully at his mustache. "What a pike that must be, Mr. McNab," he said solemnly. "A monster by the sound of it." "There was no pike," said Posty. He cleared his throat. "Tell me now," he said hesitantly. "You live nearby. Do you think there's anything living in the lock-in?" "Oh, aye," said Grumble. "There's fish aplenty." "I don't mean fish," said Posty. "I mean, have you ever seen—" He dropped his voice to a whisper. "Could it be the Kelpie?" "Oh, Mr. McNab," said Grumble, "you're surely not going to tell folk there's a Kelpie in this lock-in. I'm not saying that such creatures don't exist. There was one in Loch Morar when I was a boy. But for a man in your position to be saying such a thing, why, it would be most unwise." "Unwise?" said Posty. Yes, said Grumble, if it got about that someone like you, a responsible public servant entrusted with the delivery of His Majesty's mail for miles around, was talking about seeing monsters, why, the powers that be in the post office might begin to doubt your fitness for the job. And there's a great deal of unemployment about these days, Mr. McNabb, so there is. Posty stood and dripped for a moment. So there is, he said. Maybe you'll say nothing about this? Not a word, said Grumble, and then, as if to seal the promise, now you mustn't catch cold, so you'll take a wee dram with me before you go. It could have been very nasty, he said later, when Mother and the children had heard the tale, but I don't think Posty will say anything. Crusoe was good, though, wasn't he? Said Kirsty. Good? Well, he didn't show himself. No, but he smashed up Posty's boat, said Mother. He shivered its timbers, said Angus. And that brings us to the end of chapter 9. Chapter 10 is called A Harebrained Plan, and I can't wait for you to read that one next.